Hello.
Hello.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. You?
Okay.
How many are we expecting for the class?
I don't know. When I was in a meeting yesterday, I was told that 30 people had signed up. So how many people actually show up? I don't know. We will see. We
Uh,
will see. But so what's your history?
well, actually, I'm an illustrator. But I don't have like formal training because my background
Oh,
is industrial design. So that's why whenever I have a chance, I try to get in these classes. And honestly, if I get the chance and if I earn enough money, I want to study again. And MTM and Scenic
oh,
are the top two choices for me. I've been looking around and I've heard from students OCAD seems to be overrated from what I hear.
yeah, that's where I went from 80 to 84. And everything I'm going to talk about, I'm going to cover a little bit of the fundamental stuff about composition. The stuff I'm going to go over will help anybody. If they implement it into their work, it's going to help them immediately have their work be stronger and more control over what they're doing and more visual interest. I didn't
Awesome.
learn. I didn't learn any of that at OCAD. OCA. I had to learn all that stuff on my own
Oh
out.
my God, you're just confirming everything I've heard.
Yeah,
It's
well,
sad.
and we've had students. I teach a design and composition course in first term of first year, and so we get all the first year students are in that course. And every once in a while, I'll get students who said that, oh, I was at OCAD for like a year or two, and then they come here and they start to go through the course and go, yeah, we were never getting any of that there.
Oh my
And
God.
so yeah, it hasn't changed, but what I'm going to cover is so fundamental to making images, and it's what every professional image maker knows. You'd think that would be uh, foundational first year information for anybody at any art school and stuff like that. But I'm kind of shocked at how little it gets covered
Oh
because,
my God, that's amazing. Yeah, even knowing these things, sometimes getting them articulated, and it gives you a different understanding of them, right?
yeah, because the information has been out there for centuries. And I'm sure there's like a ton of YouTube videos going, oh, do this and this and this. And I'm sure it's all good information. The difference between learning that on your own, and again, I had to do it through books because there was no online stuff. And again, after OCA, I was, graduated and I took 2 years off before I could go looking for work because I had to build up a portfolio
Oh,
of work good enough because I didn't like their illustration department. And I spent my last 2 years in their fine art department painting and stuff because I wanted to be an illustrator who painted. And so I graduated with no illustration work to show, but I knew I didn't know composition. I didn't know folds in clothing. I didn't know lighting and stuff like that. So I had to learn all of that on my own. And so I built up a portfolio over 2 years. But when I started looking for work, I got hired immediately and stayed employed for the rest of my career
oh,
because people are looking for that knowledge and skill. And that's what we want to give anybody at our school, that same knowledge. So when they graduate, they've got that skill set and knowledge. And I'm hoping even in a class like this, if somebody is interested in making images, if they're interested in painting or drawing or illustrating, even the few things I'm going to talk about will be enough to help them improve what they're doing and have more control. So,
that's awesome. That's awesome. And, one thing I've picked up and I've learned gradually is that you can have good anatomy, but if you can't draw proper clothes on them, it's really gonna mess up your drawing.
yep, yep. Yeah, that's been an issue at our school too. There's another. I'm in the concept art department. I'm a co-coordinator with another illustrator, Alan Howell, and it's kind of one of our pet peeves in that there's a lot of figure drawing at the school. But because we're illustrators and we know what's really important once you start working, is to know that figure, but then also you're not going to be drawing the naked figure for the
Yeah.
rest of the day. You're going to be drawing clothed figures, and you need to know the mechanics of drapery and how folds, what all of this is and stuff
Yes.
like that, and how to replicate it. And without photo reference is good, but you don't want to copy every little fold you see. It's about design. It's about using those folds to show the body underneath there, but also have beautiful design with your folds so it doesn't look busy and cluttered. Man, one of the people I learned that from was from an illustrator named N.C. Wyeth, who did absolutely beautiful clothing on his characters, and I just kept stealing from him.
That's what I realized. You really, this stealing is how you learn. You borrow things and eventually it becomes your own, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm looking forward to the class. I think people are trickling in. So I'm gonna, yeah.
Well, thanks for showing up, and I hope you find this useful.
I will. I'm confident. Thank you. Thank you for having this class.
Oh, well, for me, this is a joy passing this stuff on, because like I said, it's been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And I like passing it along to anybody if they're interested in making images and stuff, because I know even the little bit I'm going to pass on today will help them improve their work. And I love being able to do that. So it's a joy
Awesome.
for me to do this.
Awesome.
And here's a glut of what I'm going to be talking about, but it's mostly all the stuff that's going on in this image by Rubens from about 400 years ago. And these devices were old when he was using them. But like something like that, and where's the other one? Yeah, those two images, on the surface, their subject matter is completely different, but compositionally, they are using the exact same devices in the exact same way. And if I've got because these are the things I'm going to go over: creating focus, placement for that focus, rhythm. There are two aspects of rhythm: varying your elements, creating a pathway around your image or through your image, and stuff like that. And there's another one. Is it this one? Yeah, it's this one. Yeah. Again, that's a little digital piece I did. Like, I'm not a digital artist. I work in oil, but that's a digital piece I did just as a demonstration of working digitally and building up imagery and stuff like that. But that too is using the exact same compositional devices that Rubens was using in terms of focus and placement and the rhythmic arrangement and the movement that's built into these elements and stuff like that. And so we're going to cover a lot of that stuff. And it's like the exact same things are going on in that. Maybe not quite the movement around the image as much, but the focus, the placement, the rhythmic arrangement of these elements. All of that is not arbitrary or accidental. All of this stuff is by design. Like where you're looking, why you're looking there, the reason these figures are arranged like this, all has to do with creating focus, controlling the image. That's why that isn't popping in a lot of other places to pull your focus anywhere. And doing stuff with your elements to increase the visual interest of what you're doing. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking at. And it's everywhere. There's a black and white Disney film from 2012 called Paperman, and it's silent. There's no dialogue, and it's black and white, but every single frame is readable based on what we're going to be talking about today. And like I said, here's a film from the 60s called The Innocents, but every single frame, your eye is going exactly where they want you to go, even though there might be lots of stuff in that frame. What they're doing to get your focus there is what we're going to be covering. And like I said, every professional image maker in every single field is using all this exact same stuff. Illustration, painting. I know I've got like comics and stuff around here, but film, television, animation, video games. Yeah, here's a couple of panels from a comic series of Black Sad, a great graphic novel series that got the writer is great, but the artist who does the illustrations is fantastic. And again, in both of those frames, your eye is being drawn to a certain area. And it's not about the subject matter, it's about what's happening with the stuff we're going to talk about. But if you start to think of your work in this way and not your surface subject matter, everything becomes a lot easier to deal with. It's like, if you want to see what I do, this is just like some of my stuff. These pieces, these are all illustrations I've done, but all of them have a dominant focus. Stuff like this. Again, that was another little digital piece I did just as a demonstration. But something like this one over on the right, this giant T-Rex like attacking a balloon and stuff like that. The bottom of it looks like this. All these, clowns and stuff like that flooding the street. And if you look at just that, that's a lot of stuff going on. And there might be a little bit of focus on this area here and maybe that area here, but that's just the bottom third of that image. And when you see the entire image, you don't even look at this stuff. I mean, you're looking up here. And you're not even looking at all these clowns and their clothing and their detail and all that kind of stuff. So it thinking in this way allows you to come up with whatever you want. Like here's Mobius, a fantastic artist and graphic comic artist. And here's a giant army that he's got in his image, but that's only a little section of his image. And when you see the entire image, that doesn't grab your attention as much as this area over here. And so it doesn't matter what you've got in your image. If you understand what we're going to be covering today, you can come up with any image you want and have anything in it. It's about understanding how to create focus and how to control your image so that it reads the way that you want. And also what you can do with some of the elements in your image of creating a variety, but also maybe creating a pathway around your image and stuff like that. And so I'm just going to cover those few things, but I do want to kind of talk to them enough that they make sense to people. So
Scott, can I request because there's a lot of Scott Camerons. You have your name is very. You have us Instagram, because I want to see your body of work, man.
Oh, I can show you it here because no, I don't have a website or anything
Okay.
like that. But I can show you my stuff.
Awesome.
And I'll start with that original portfolio that I did right after graduating from OCA, because I had to make up all this stuff because I didn't graduate from the school with anything to show. And so a lot of this stuff, like something like this, it wasn't about like making a wizard. For me, that was an exercise in lighting and folds in clothing, like the stuff I didn't know. And so I had to, that was an exercise in starting to understand that stuff. And so that was, but I was showing, various, these are acrylic, but I've been working in oil since '87 and stuff like that. But things like this, that was in my original portfolio. And a lot of it was geared towards just regular illustration, but also, possibly book and all that kind of stuff. And the magazine is the first stuff I started doing. Like this was my first illustration. That was like in '86. That was for a children's magazine. And that was like the next one and that one. And a lot of this stuff is like magazine work here and stuff like that, editorial stuff. And but I've got to do, I've been able to do like lots of dinosaur stuff over the years and stuff, which is a lot of fun. But you know, magazine covers, stuff like this. And then, you know, pages inside the magazine, just editorial stuff. And a lot of, I'll get back to this in a sec, but book covers, stuff like that. And doing a bunch in a series like this. And yeah, just various book covers over the years, things like that. Oh, and yeah, this one was fun. This is a wraparound, that kind of stuff. And, illustrated books, something like that. And then the, you know, the illustrations inside would look like this. And this is where, again, understanding lighting and folds and stuff like would really come in handy, because it was, I do a shot like that and there's all this close to do and stuff like that. And you want to be able to know that stuff. Yeah, so when I'm doing a book like this, like The Root Cellar, and I'm doing a shot like this with all these people waiting on a train platform, I can just make that stuff up and do their clothing and have it look accurate, because I studied the mechanics of drapery and lighting and stuff. So those are that's a skill set you definitely want to have. And, you know, stuff like this. And again, all of this stuff is the kind of thing I'm going to be talking about today. Creating focus, controlling your image no matter what you've got in it, creating, you know, visual interest, you know, stuff like this, creating a dominant area of focus. But then what do you do with your elements? You make sure that there's nice variety going on. That's what Rubens was doing with his lions and stuff. And like none of this is new. None of this has changed. And
I love that some of your works, the way you shift your lighting, some of it is a bit like Norman Rockwell, but you can also do a range of stuff. And I can tell the lighting. There's
oh,
so yeah.
yeah, I loved Rockwell's early stuff, his stuff from the 20s and 30s when he painted beautifully. When he got into the 40s and 50s and he really tightened up, I just did not like that stuff. There's a, like I said, there's an illustrator. One of the illustrators I loved is a guy named N.C. Wyeth, and there's a lot of Frank Frazetta, if you know him. There's Frank Frazetta in here. There's Wyeth.
Frazetta is a master.
Yeah, there's Wyeth. Oh, I mean, I'll go back to my early portfolio for a sec. Yeah, I mean, this has Frazetta's influence in it, and this was just my like joking around with Frazetta and stuff. So.
That is so heavy metal.
But these ones, these are Wyeth. These are me looking at N.C. Wyeth and trying to do what he did and stuff. Because Wyeth is and there's a lot of great American, like, again, this is the influence of N.C. Wyeth in there as well. But yeah, those are the illustrated books, stuff like this. Just knowing, again, this is all compositional. This is understanding focus. This is understanding placement. This is understanding control. This is understanding rhythm, all that kind of stuff. So somebody looking at this on the surface, oh, they'll see some people and stuff like that. For me, a lot of this is technical. I mean, there is definitely a psychological, emotional aspect that you put into your work. And a lot of times you could be working with subtext and symbolism, and there could be themes underneath your imagery. That's absolutely a part of your image making. But on a sheer like technical level, this involves placement and creating contrast for focus. And there's things in here called like leading lines and stuff like that. That's another thing we cover in the course that I can't talk about today, but they are useful devices that you can employ in your work to, again, increase the visual interest of what you're doing and the control. A lot of stuff like this. These are like textbook illustrations and stuff. Yeah, I already showed that one a bit. And things like this. Yeah, I would get an assignment to do like a Native American village and people out in the field clearing weeds away from the crops and stuff like that. So it was a double-page spread. There'd be like a gutter right here, so you don't want anything interesting right there between the two pages. But what do you do with your elements? This is where you're understanding that your subject matter is important on a surface level, but design-wise, it's not. What's really important is your placement, what you do with those elements to create visual interest, and then it becomes down to rhythm and variety, and that's why these figures look the way they do. It's so that there was variety in those shapes, exactly the same thing that this person is doing. If I go back to that workshop, it's why these figures look the way they do. That person is doing the exact same thing I'm doing with these figures. It's making sure that those elements have some visual variety and they're not all the same height and all the same size and the same spaces between them and stuff like that. Because that variety will pay off aesthetically in your imagery. Your viewer might not understand it. They'll just think, oh, that looks nice. But if you gave them an option where everything was even, that would look less interesting and more monotonous to them. They don't understand why this looks as striking as it does. But if all these people were the same height and standing in a kind of flat arrangement, this image would not have the kind of dynamic impact that it does. And understanding that your characters are one thing, but if you think of them as elements to be arranged and designed, then dealing with your stuff becomes a lot easier. And you're not going, oh, I've got to make so-and-so look like that character everybody loves. If you think of it in terms of, no, this element has a part to play visually, it becomes a lot easier to arrange your stuff so that it reads really well and is visually interesting. And yeah, so I've done tons and tons of stuff like that. Yeah, things like this. Again, that's all about rhythm. When I was arranging these figures, it was to make sure that they were varied. It's not just that they were, visually interesting in their clothing and their color and stuff like that, but the trip you take across that image I wanted it to be visually interesting for a viewer, and so that they're not all, the same height and stuff like that. So rhythm, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today, because there's establishing focus, there's controlling your value ranges, but rhythm, what you do with the arrangement of your elements, is a really, really useful aspect of your image making. And so if people can even just start to bring that into what they do, it'll start to make their work better. They'll have more control over what they're doing. The viewer might not know why it looks good, but it's because of this variety that we respond positively to and stuff. But yeah, done lots and lots of stuff over the years. And all of it for me is those basic things. Even though there's lots of different subject matter, for me, the approach to all of it is, and yeah, this is like digital stuff that I've done for the classes, just to, do examples of process and stuff like that. And yeah, because I'm not a digital artist, I use a mouse to do all this stuff. So it's, but because I'm a painter, like here's the process. Because I'm a painter, for me, it's not about using the stylus to do beautiful little details. For me, it's about using a brush to block in big shapes and render with light over top of that. So, because that's how I work physically when I'm doing an oil painting and stuff. So I just bring that same process to the digital stuff. And it's easy for me to do this stuff even with a mouse, because yeah, things like this, that was all done, like the process for it was like this. Like that's how I paint. I work with blocked in value masses and then start to bring the light over top of it. So it's like I didn't draw any of these figures or anything. For me, they're all just blocked in shapes, and then I start to render the light over those forms. And that's what I meant about I needed to understand lighting after I graduated, because even though I spent 2 years in painting, they really didn't go over that stuff with us either. And when you understand this, when you understand the mechanics of clothing, it becomes a lot easier. When you understand lighting on forms, with understanding planes and what light source is hitting what plane, it actually becomes very easy to do stuff like this, because you're not thinking in detail again. You're always thinking in terms of what plane is receiving what kind of light source. And so even when you start with a blocked in mass, then you start giving the various planes their various light sources. And when you're done, you've got this thing that looks like it's sculpted with light, rather than drawing stuff and then coloring it in. So, I mean, there's all ways of approaching painting. This is the way I prefer. Anything's valid if it gets you to the end result. And then I just expanded the frame and added more figures. But even when I did that, it's about making sure these guys don't grab your attention and this stays the dominant focal area. Because it's not about surface subject matter. It's about understanding how to control your work, no matter what you're putting in there. So that's what I want this workshop to be, because I know that kind of approach can help anybody do whatever they want and get more control over because I know if you don't know this stuff, the way people usually approach this is all they've ever seen is the end result, the surface subject matter. And they go, oh, that's beautiful. I want my stuff to look like that. So that is what they're focusing on. They're focused on making their stuff look like the finished stuff they see. And if somebody isn't really well versed in these aspects of composition, but they might draw well and they might render stuff, they might be one of those people that do really busy images that have lots of detail and stuff in them. And if you start emulating that, you will get the same result those people do, in that you'll have images that have lots of stuff going on, but they aren't really well controlled. They're kind of popping everywhere. There's stuff fighting for your attention everywhere. That's because those people might not understand about this stuff and just proceed right to their characters and their detail because they think that's what's important. But what's actually important is this other stuff underneath, to get your image working well first, and then you can put your details on and control all that stuff so that your image doesn't get away from you. So that's what I want this workshop to be. And yeah, stuff like this. It's like there's just a creature that started from just a blob of shape, and it's all about understanding planes on light source on planes and stuff like that. So again, this just started with I didn't draw anything. I didn't draw any of the landscape. I didn't draw any of this stuff. It all just started with blocking in light on planes and forms and stuff. But I didn't like this thing, so I tried again. And again, it all just starts with a blocked in shape, and then you start hitting planes with light. And so if you see the end result, it might look like I drew all that stuff and then, colored it in. But I didn't even know what I was doing when I started. I just started playing around with shape and then started playing around with lighting and color. And all of this stuff down here is just playing around with shape and stuff. But if you know how to paint, if you know how to control an image, then you can do anything and have it read well. And again, this is also where that movement I was talking about that Rubens had. Well, I'm going to go into that in a minute, but I've actually got like movement built into this image that would lead your eye around that space and stuff like that. So all of these various devices are very, very useful. Again, there's another creature that just started up out of nothing. It just started up out of shape. I didn't, draw anything. I just started putting shape over that blue bison that I didn't like. I just started playing around, and yeah. But when you understand shape and lighting and positive space and negative space and placement and all that kind of stuff, it just helps you do anything and have it read the way that you want, so that you're not overwhelmed by anything that you do. Stuff like this. Yeah, so that's like the digital stuff that it's fun. And again, like something like that, that just started as a joke. If I've got it started as this, just because these motifs are so prevalent in concept art, skulls and waterfalls and stuff like that. They're less so now, but about 10 years ago, they were like everywhere. And so this was just like a joke about that. But even within that, there's the dominant focus you create so that you don't have things popping everywhere, that you don't have equal areas of contrast. You create a dominant one. And then even with the arrangement of these skulls, it's rhythm that I'm thinking about, not, oh, I want to paint a cool skull. It's about the arrangement of these elements. That's what's important, and creating depth and shape and stuff like that. Hopefully you come up with an interesting image when you're done. But for me, it's these basic foundational things that are underneath any of the surface imagery, because those are the things that really help you control what you're doing. So, and Then Disney had a studio in Toronto for a few years in the mid 90s, and I was hired as a background painter there. And so we worked on a few direct-to-video sequels. And then I've been teaching at the school since about 2008. Yeah, like I said, I love passing this stuff on because I know how helpful it is if people start using it. The one drawback there might be, oh, hello. We've got more people here. Okay. Hello. Manira, am I saying that right? I don't want to mispronounce anyone's name, so please let me know if I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, but I was about to say the one, oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, the one thing this, especially the design comp course does, it is like a magician revealing their tricks. It's, but if you are interested in making images, you're gonna need to want to know this stuff, and it's what every professional image maker knows. It's just that it can ruin the experience of maybe watching stuff, because where before you would watch a TV show or a movie and you'd just be watching the characters or the actors or whatever. Now you're going to know why you're looking where you're looking, and that knowledge might kind of ruin the experience a bit. But like I said, if you do want to be a professional or just be really well versed or skilled at this, this is stuff that you do need to know. So, and yeah, because this is being recorded, if we're going to start now, and if anybody else does show up later and they miss the opening stuff, they can watch the recording, but I don't want this to drag on too long, and I don't want to take up too much people's time. So we'll get started. And for this, I do show a lot of visual reference examples. It's what I found is the best way of explaining all of these devices and concepts and principles for image making. It's the way I learned composition out of one of the best composition books I've ever seen by a guy named Henry Kloor, because when I graduated from college and they didn't teach us this at OCA and I needed to study it on my own, I bought all the compositional books there were in '84, and a lot of them were heavy in text, but Poor's book was beautifully designed in that he would have images and then explain what was happening in those images with arrows and diagrams and stuff like that to make it very clear compositionally what was happening in those images. And so that's the way I teach the course, because it makes the most sense to me. So what I need to do for that, though, is I need to present my screen, because I've got a lot of imagery to show. And please, if your mic is working, then please don't hesitate to interrupt me if you're want more clarity about what I'm saying, or if you're if I'm if you want me to present it more clearly, or if if you have any questions, you can either use the hand icon and raise your hand, because if you put something in the chat room, I'm not going to see it. So please, if you have a question, don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask your questions, because we're all just here for me to pass on this information and for you to learn. And I don't want you to, oh, I have a question to ask, but I don't want to interrupt them. This is about you. This is about you being here for information for you. So if you've got a question, please interrupt me, because it's all about you understanding this stuff. But I'll start with these 4 images. And in that upper right one, where does your attention go to strongly in that upper right image?
Um, I go directly to the face of that man looking at that creature.
Oh, the upper right one.
Oh, sorry, upper right. Oh,
Yeah.
Captain America,
Oh,
definitely.
yeah, yeah. Again, and that's the obvious answer. And now we'll go to the one in the upper left. And you go to the area of the guy talking to that creature.
Yeah.
And the one below, where does your attention go to strongly in that image?
For me, it's first the eyes of that little girl. I don't know if, yeah, but then immediately after, you tend to look in her direction
Well,
towards what she's looking at.
yeah, and I'll show you something, because when we have time to look at an image, we will focus on the details we find interesting. I'll show you something in a minute, what's really going on there. And the one on the bottom right is kind of obvious. Like there's no question where you look in that one.
It's
But
the color. Anything that red, it just draws you in.
yeah, well, especially when it's when it's contrasting with its complementary color of green, and it's also warm against a cool color and all that kind of. It's the I'll show you what's going on in all these images. But yeah, I'm going to Captain America is the right answer. But that's the surface level answer, because what's actually going on is this. And let me see where that is. If it's this one, it should be this one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and there's that one of Captain America, and the one below it, it's a little fuzzy, it's a little dark, but he's still there. And are you going to him in that image below, or is your attention going somewhere else?
Well, it's definitely going to that.
You don't know
Left
what it
hand.
is. It's a
Yeah,
blob, light and dark, because that's all it is.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
it
But it,
is. It's no representational subject matter. But when we look at an average image, when we're watching a TV show or a movie, we're focusing on that representational subject matter, because but it's not the reason for the focus. If Captain America was the reason we were looking there, we should still be looking there, even in the one below, if we're looking there because of what that subject matter is. We should still be looking there. He's still there. If he's the reason we're looking there in the top one, we should still be looking there in the bottom. But the subject matter of your imagery in terms of composition doesn't matter. That subject matter is going to change from image to image to image, from frame to frame to frame, from comic panel to comic panel. How you make any individual image read the way you want is this stuff, and it's contrast. We are always going to go to the strongest contrast that's happening in an image, and you just make your subject matter that strongest contrast, and we will look where you want us to look. But when you don't know this stuff, you think it's the subject matter that you're looking at. You think you're looking there because it's that character in the movie or that actor that you know. But they are making you look there in very specific ways. And same with this on the upper left. It's not just that guy, like the president or whatever. It's kind of this area that you're looking at that's really grabbing your attention, because this is where the strong contrast of light and dark is happening. But I can make your interest go wherever I want, because it's not about the subject matter. It's about whatever contrast I create. And that is why you look where you look in every image that's ever been made, and every image that you're ever going to look at, whether it's a painting or an illustration or a TV show. it's always going to be driven by this, not the subject matter, even though that's what's on the surface and that's what you think you're looking at. And same thing with these. That one of the girl, if I make her really small, it's not her eyes. You're looking at this. You're looking at this blob of light. That's the highest value against the darkest value in that image. It's the strongest value contrast in that image, and that is what's grabbing your attention. If I can do that later, but again, you can do anything to draw a viewer's attention anywhere you want just by the contrast that you're making. The subject matter is irrelevant in terms of focus. It's all about the contrast that you make. And in that bottom, one of the Hello Kitty one, I've gotten rid of the red. I've also taken out this darker value against that lighter sky. And now I've made that little deer there, the red color. That's where your attention goes. Even though there's this bigger Hello Kitty back there, it doesn't quite contrast as much as that does. So it's, yeah, the way images actually work is not about your subject matter, even though that's what, when you don't know this stuff, that's generally what people think is happening. They're looking there because of what the subject matter is. But that's not how images actually work. And if you want to make images, if you want to control what you're doing and increase the impact, this is the kind of stuff you need to know. And this is also how you need to approach your work as well. You need to, the important aspect of starting your imagery will be doing a little tonal thumbnail to make sure your image reads well. And then you can go into the more fun stuff of color and detail and stuff like that. But your values are absolutely critical to how your image reads or not. And if I have something like this, can anyone tell me what they're looking at?
I can't
No,
see
but
anything.
but can you tell me where you're looking?
The white part on the lower left.
Exactly. Exactly. Your brain is trying to make representational sense, but it's just a blur. It's just a blur of shape and value. But you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know what the subject matter is, but you know where your eye is being drawn to. And that's how every image works. The very split second you see something, and then when your brain has a second to look at the image and the representational imagery takes, shape, that's when your brain goes, oh, that's what I'm looking at. But in the very first instant you ever see anything, this is how your brain actually responds. You go to that area of high contrast. And let's see, yeah. Now it's right side up. It was upside down before. And can you tell me what you're looking at?
I see a figure walking towards, walking forward from the perspective, at least. But yeah, going towards the lower to the right. I see a head on the upper left. The bridge to the eyes. It seems that the figure is holding something.
Yes. Yeah, I get a lot of figure on bike because these look like handlebars and there's like an arm here and it looks like maybe there could be a wheel, but that people seem to see those as handlebars and they see a figure on a bike. But you're right, it's a figure because again, your brain has a bit more information when it's trying to make representational sense of what it's seeing. And if I can get to the right one. This is what the image actually is. And when you don't know this stuff and you look at an image like that, you think you're looking there because of this beautiful, character with the clothing and the color and the detail. You think that's why you're looking there. But it's not. You're looking at this light blob against all these darker values. This is called a low-key image. And I'm going to be getting to that in a minute too. Low-key images where the majority of the values in your image are darker and you have a smaller area of lighter value. And because of that high contrast, your attention is drawn to that small area of light value that's popping against all those dark values. High key is exactly the opposite, where the majority of the values in your image are light values, and you'll have a smaller area of dark value that contrasts and pops and grabs your attention. It's one of the easier ways of making a controlled image is to play around with high key or low key. And it's what animation does so that their characters can read really well. Film does it all the time. Every discipline uses it. But again, she's still there, but I can draw your attention anywhere I want, because it's not about the subject matter. It's about the contrasts that are created that the viewer's eye will be drawn to. So this is how your imagery actually works. And so this is what you can now start to have control over when you're making an image with characters and like a group of characters, and you maybe want one of them to stand out more than the other. You give that character the strongest contrast. And color is a big part of it. I just don't have time to talk about color. Saturation and color, how you use your saturated area of color to your desaturated areas of color. That's like the color version of value. I just don't have the time today to go over that. I'm just basically sticking to value, because value is absolutely critical. If you can start to understand how to make your imagery based on your value relationships, that will give you so much more control than you might have had before. Because this is how images actually work. And if I've got something like that, again, can you tell me what you're looking at?
My brain tells me it's upside down figures, two sets of images.
Your brain is absolutely right. And when I show you the actual images, you may have seen one or both of these before. And here it is right side up. And you're right, it's two figures in two separate images. And now those shapes are making more sense to your brain. And, oh, I can see the figures now. I still don't know what they're doing, but you do know where you're looking. You're, especially on that one on the left, you're looking at that kind of upper left area. So, because that's where the strongest contrast is happening.
Is this from Batman Dark Knight?
Nope, but every poster, every kind of thing does the exact same thing. But you are right; they are both from superhero movies. And this is where they're from. That's the poster for Spider-Man, and that's a section of a poster for Avengers: Age of Ultron. But each separate illustrator, years apart, is doing the exact same thing for the exact same reason. They need a dark blob against a light blob to get you where they want you to look. And especially in the case of there's a big sort of advertisement poster for Age of Ultron. In color, it looks like that. And in black and white, it's a little easier to go to that area of dominant focus that illustrator has created. When it's in color, you're going to start to go to those areas that you find interesting and stuff like that. But even still, even with all that, the strongest area of contrast is happening right here. And you can see it in the black and white. And if I make it really small, that's still the strongest area that your eye goes to, even as busy as that image is, as much stuff as is going on in that image. This is still the strongest area that your eye responds to. And you want something like that. If you get rid of it, you've got an image of busy clutter. if you've got 4 or 5 other areas like this, you've got another image of busy clutter, because you've got 4 other areas of the same level of contrast. For your imagery to read really well and really strongly, and for you to have control over what you're doing, you designate one area to be your dominant area of focus, the strongest contrast in your image. And the other areas, with whatever might be going on there, you have those values be lower contrast, and so that they don't pop as much. That's how you control your imagery, and that you can have whatever you want going on, but it doesn't get away from you. And this is kind of the thing amateurs don't know. And if they are just really into drawing and detail and rendering, they will do images that are very busy, but also can end up being very cluttered and very hard to look at, because they don't know about creating a dominant area of focus. They just want to show everything off everywhere, all at the same level. And that's an amateur's level of understanding, not a professional's. And again, if I make that nice and big but blur it, you're still going to that same area of high contrast. This is how your images work. And I could do this one of Enrique Fernandez. I won't, because I don't want to go too far out of time. But here's an abstract painting. There's no representational imagery for your brain to latch onto in that. But when you look at it, is there an area that you find that your eye is drawn to maybe a little bit stronger than some of the other areas?
That area, upper middle, the one with the T shape.
They,
that area, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, because this is the area where it's the darkest value against the lightest. Every other area has lights and darks, but they're not quite as strong as this. Even these blacks have, you know, modeling on them to soften their value. This is the strongest contrast of light and dark value in the image. Even this black here isn't against white, and when it is against white, it's a little bit more, it's a little less black than that. But you're generally looking here, and that's not accidental or arbitrary. That abstract painter was very much in control of what they were doing and getting you to look where they want you to look. The abstract painting isn't just blobs of shape and color and value. If an artist knows what they're doing, they are also in control of that seemingly random image. Here's another abstract painting. And again, no representational elements, no figures, no stuff that your brain recognizes. This just has shape and color and value. But is there an area in that colored abstract painting that is pulling your focus more than another area?
That lower right, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's where the darker values are. That's where the more saturated orange red color is. And if you take the color out, this is where the strongest contrast of values is happening. So even in something that might seem as random and arbitrary as an abstract painting, there is a lot of control going on here in terms of the choices that this artist is making, in terms of their value choices and arrangement of elements and stuff like that. So yeah, that's not accidental. That's by design. And I just want to go back to this for a sec. Before I do that, again, this is how your brain works. This is how values work. And when you look at something like this, your brain is probably going to go there because it's in this image of low value contrast. That's one of the areas that stands out a little stronger, and that's going to grab your attention. in this one. Again, there's an area in here in all of these various values that might stand out a little bit stronger and grab your attention, and that's where your eye goes. There's no representational stuff, there's just value changes, but that contrast is what is grabbing your eye. And so I'm going to do something like this. There's going to be a very clear area that your eye goes to, even though there's lots of other areas of value change going on in that image. That image on that section on the right with the white and the black blob in it, that's high contrast. And everything else in that image is lower contrast. And when you look at something like, where are they? They should be within, oh, they're right here. Here they are. Yeah, here are two Orientalist paintings. It would have been done around the 1850s, 60s, 70s, stuff like that. They're both set out in the desert, and they both have representational subject matter. But in the top one, your focus is going to go here. Not because of a character. I mean, you don't even know who this is. What your eye is responding to is this dark blob against all this light stuff. And even though there's other characters, like bigger characters here, they don't contrast as much as this area does. And in the one below it, even though there's not a hard contrast of strong value between lights and darks, you're still going to go to that area that does contrast. Even though it's a softer contrast like this, you're still drawn to the area that does pop a bit. And your eye doesn't have any control over that. You are going to go where the contrast is. And so as an image maker, you use that to your advantage. You make the area you want your viewer to go to in your image, you give that area the strongest contrast in your image, and your viewer will look there. They have no choice. So when I get to something like this, this is Daniel in the Lion's Den by Peter Paul Rubens. And again, it was done about 400 years ago. But like I was saying earlier, all of these devices Rubens was using 400 years ago were old when he was using them. They had already been around for hundreds of years by the time he got to using them. But every image maker still uses these exact same devices because of how they work and the roles they play. And so in an image like this, I would ask people, where does your eye go to? And they'll say, Daniel. And I'll now say why. And they'll say, oh, because he's that light value against that dark area. And there's also some saturated red grabbing your attention. And I'll get to that in a sec too. But once you've looked here, once you've looked at Daniel, what grabs your attention the strongest after him?
After looking at the face, it was that red cape or that fabric on his right side.
Okay, so but once you finished looking at all of this stuff, like where does your attention go once you finished in this area?
I guess towards the faces of the lions. Well,
Yeah, any particular direction? I'll make it small just to, because that usually strengthens the focus. Once you've looked at him, what grabs your attention next?
Oh, right now it's that blue spot on the top. I don't know. Am I seeing it right? That blue, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because of the color contrast from everything else, aside from the red.
Yeah, no, the way Rubens has designed this value-wise, the thing that should grab your attention next is this.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the next area of strong value contrast. And so he wants you to look here and then start looking to the left. And once your focus is here, this might catch your attention.
It's circular.
Yes. Because once you're here, and then you might see that line. That line is looking at this line, but this line is not looking in that same direction out of frame. Once you're here, once this light value contrast grabs your attention, this line is looking back. And if you follow that direction, you might catch the mane and the light parts of this lion, or you might catch this light fur on their paw, and the tail, the paw, all of that might lead your direction this way, and you might follow this mane down this way to the snout of that line. And once you're here, this paw or that mane might pull your focus that way, or the tail and curve of the body of that lion might get your attention going that way. He's built in a circular pathway around his image after you've looked at Daniel. Once you've looked at that dominant focus, there's other stuff that's going to grab your attention in sequence and lead your attention around that image rather than a line of something leading you out of frame. It's like the tail here is not going this way out of frame. It's once you're here, oh, that value might grab your attention, or the heel of that leg, and draw you up this way. And that line isn't looking out of frame. Its neck is curving back this way. So you follow all of those shapes and lines around that space. And that's a visual pathway. It's also one aspect of what's called rhythm. Any arrangement of your elements in your image is that image's rhythm. We tend to like variety. So arrangement of elements like this one is, then there's a bit of space, and this one's higher than this one, and then there's some space here, and then this one's up here, but this one's down here, and this one's a little higher than this one, and then that one goes back up again, and that one's even higher. It all compositionally plays out like this. There's that dominant contrast of value to grab your attention, and his placement isn't in the center of that space. It's on a division of thirds, which it's called rule of thirds, division of thirds, but it doesn't mean you're wrong if you don't put it there. If you want to move stuff off center and you don't put it on a division of thirds, it doesn't mean it's wrong. Like he could have placed them right here, and it's still going to be fine. Anything off center to create movement and increase the visual interest is fine. It's just that division of thirds is just a nice place to put stuff that isn't dead center and isn't so close to the edge that it looks a little awkward. But any placement is valid depending on what your intent is. So just because there's something called rule of thirds doesn't mean you're doing it wrong if you don't put it on that division. It's just an option. And that's focus and placement. And then this is one aspect of rhythm, of varying your elements. And this is another aspect of rhythm, of any kind of pathway. This is circular. There can be S-shaped pathways, Z-shaped pathways, diagonal pathways through an image. Circular is a really useful, popular one because it gets the entire use of that space used in the viewer's attention through the image and stuff. So, but these 5 things Rubens is doing, creating focus through value contrast, controlling his image by these other values being lesser contrast, the placement to create some visual interest rather than dead center, and the variety he's giving his elements in terms of their arrangement, their rhythmic arrangement, and the visual pathway that he's producing. All those 5 things, if you start to do any of them in your imagery, will automatically start to increase the control that you have and also increase the visual interest and the impact that you can put into your work. So these were the kind of 5 compositional devices I wanted to go over today that you see over and over and over again because of how well they all work. There's lots of other things you can do for composition, but this is a nice little group that can help any image that you do. And it's like this one below it is completely different surface subject matter, but it's the compositional devices are being used in the exact same way. There's a dominant area of focus by high contrast and also saturated color. And then once you look here, this area is going to grab your attention. And then once you're here, you'll start to follow these ghost figures. And again, they're not going out of frame. They're curving, leading your attention back here. And once you're here, you'll look at this rock structure. And again, that's not a line leading out of the frame. It's curving back this way. This kind of dragon head on this rock shape is curving back down this way to lead your focus back to this guy, just the way this lion leads your focus back to Daniel. Completely different subject matter, hundreds of years apart, but both of them are using those compositional devices that were, again, hundreds of years old when Rubens was using them. They are still as relevant today as they've ever been to help you control your work, increase the impact, increase the visual interest of what you're doing. So again, these might be kind of the magician showing how the tricks are done. But if you do want to gain control of what you're doing, these are the things you're going to want to know because they will help you make your work better. And like I said, that digital piece I did, it's completely different subject matter, but the compositional elements are exactly the same. High contrast of value for focus, placement off center. This one's also got a lot of positive and negative shape happening, which is, so again, something I really don't have time to cover, but is a very, very important aspect of your image making. And then it's got the rhythmic arrangement of these drunk robots, and then it's got things that will lead your eye around that space. These are very, very easy devices to put underneath whatever imagery you want to put on top of them. And they will help increase the control of what you're doing and the visual interest of what you're able to do with your imagery. And like we were saying, Mobius is an incredible artist and illustrator. This is a Mobius, full of detail and color and stuff like that. But is it so busy that it's overpowering, or is it controlled well that everything reads really nicely and there's a dominant area of focus that's stronger than the others, that all of that other stuff doesn't fight for your attention and you go strongly to this one area of focus? It's like, do you have trouble looking at that image, or do you think it's a very well controlled image?
For me, you just go immediately to that flying bird on the right, and everything else is static at first. Then you just gradually work out the details.
Exactly the way he wanted. He's got a very busy image, but he's controlled this exactly the way he wants. And you read it exactly the way he wants you to read it. And again, people who don't know this, they might come up with an image this full of stuff, but there might be areas popping everywhere because they want to show stuff off. They want to show you how they can render these bird creatures. But for Mobius, that's not important. They're there, you'll see them, but the control of his image was far more important than showing everything off everywhere. It's about control. And this is what it looks like in black and white. So even when you take the color out, you're still going to that dominant area of high contrast. And this is just a more elaborate version of this. You start adding more representational detail to that value range, and you've got Mobius's piece. But this is about how you create focus and how you control your image. He's created focus and controlled his busy image. But this is how images actually work, not the surface subject matter that you've always been used to seeing. And again, I'll go back to this one because it's a beautiful little concept piece. Very well controlled. But again, you're going here not because of who this figure is. You're going to this contrast of light and dark. But then when you go to those other elements, they're like all the people in Mobius's, flight dock. They're there. They just don't stand out as much as that bird leaving the dock. It's all, and again, that ticket in black and white. And there's its value range. And it's just a more elaborate version of this. Your images really are controlled by your value relationships. At least that's what any good professional knows. And so if you start to understand this, this can be the way you now approach your imagery rather than jumping right into that character and detail that you love and you want to get right to that stuff. If you realize how important this is to your imagery, this is the way you're going to want to start. When that idea pops in your head of an image, the best way to move forward is to go right to a little tonal study of that image so you can get your image to read properly first. Then you can go into all that cool, fun detail. If you go the other way first, you could end up with a busy image with lots of rendered detail that maybe isn't reading the way that you'd like. Because this is a lot more important than your surface subject matter. And everybody knows this. This is, I don't know if you've ever seen the James Bond film, the first James Bond film with Daniel Craig. It was called Casino Royale. But the opening sequence is in black and white in this guy's room at night. And James Bond is there to kill this guy. And the audience watching this, they're going to go to this guy. They're going to go here. But when they're watching it, they think they're looking there because they've come to see a James Bond movie. And if they know Daniel Craig, great. But they were looking there because, oh, that's James Bond. That's why I'm looking there. But the filmmakers know that that's irrelevant. How to get you to look where they want you to look is all going to be about the contrast that they're making on that screen. That's why there's a bright key light on this guy's face against a black back of his chair, and the cityscape in the background is very muted values. Even half of this image is stuff, but it's out of focus, and even the bright little blobs aren't as strong a contrast as this is. And do you see a bright light all over Daniel Craig down there, or do you just see his face? Because if there was a strong light on him, he's wearing a dark coat, but if there was a strong light on him, you might see the edges of his clothing and the back of the chair and stuff like that. But this is a studio set where the lighting is very controlled, and they've got a very small little key light shining just on his face, because that's what they want the audience to focus on, not all the other stuff in the room. This is very well controlled imagery. The audience doesn't know that. They think they're looking at the actor saying the lines, but they're actually being made to look at these blobs of light and dark, because that's how images work. And has anyone seen that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And do you know what happens next? Because that guy tells him, oh, you can't kill me. You're not a sanctioned 007 agent yet. And he says, oh, well, by the way, and then they have a flashback to where he's killed his first sanctioned kill earlier in that day. And this is in a dark office at night. This is low key with mostly dark values and those little blobs of light values, so they stand out. And so there's no confusion in the audience when they flash back to another scene earlier in the day. It's still going to be in black and white because it's still this opening sequence. What do you think the environment would look like if they don't want any confusion in their audience from this dark room? They're not going to go to a dark alleyway where it might be confusing about what's going on. What is the flashback environment do you think is going to look like? So that it's different than this.
Well, this is a very cold office, so something with contrast to that, or I don't know. There are a lot of clean spaces. There's a very clean line. Everything, the directions are very intentional. I mean, the lines.
But overall, and this is where I want you to start thinking in terms of this value. Overall, the values in these images are dark. And then the area that you focus is that higher, small contrast of light value. So that there's clarity and coherent storytelling for their viewer, when they do a flashback, they do this. They go from this dark environment, low key image, to this. That's a high key image. It's mostly light value, and they want you to focus on James Bond, the character, the subject matter in this image, and you do. And how are they getting you to do that? How are they getting you to look where they want you to look? How are they getting you to focus on that character?
The perspective.
And the darkness of that suit just
exactly
draws
that's
in.
it. It's the contrast of value, because this is an action scene, it's a fight scene, and they're moving all around this bathroom, and they don't want any confusion about who's who or what's happening. And so the guy he's fighting isn't in another dark suit, so you have two dark blobs, running around the bathroom. You are very easily able to focus on James Bond, because in the low key image, he's a light blob against all that dark. And in the high key image, he's a dark blob against all this light stuff. It's all about value. The filmmakers know that it's not about James Bond. It's not about Daniel Craig. It's not about the character. It's about how they're going to get you to read their imagery, how they want you to read it. And especially in this black and white sequence, it's all about value contrast. And that's how your images, that's how everything you've ever looked at works. That's how everything you're ever going to look at works. And that was the opening black and white sequence. At the end of the film, where this woman has taken a briefcase full of money and she's walking through the crowded streets of Venice, and James Bond is trying to track her down. So the audience has no problem following that character through this crowded, busy street scene. Contrast is happening again. She is the only person in this red, this bright red, cadmium red color. There aren't 5 other people in that same red. So that, again, contrast is happening. That bright blob of red in all of this color is the highest contrast of color in these shots. So you can very easily latch onto that figure walking through the streets. It's not about her. It's not about her character. It's about this red blob that isn't repeated anywhere else in that imagery. And that's how they get you to look where they want you to look all the time. That's why Daniel was sitting on that rich red cloth. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And you've seen this your entire life in everything you've watched. And now that I've hopefully explained it reasonably well, you're going to see this. You're going to be aware of this the next time you see it. And that's what I mean about it might ruin watching stuff for some people, because it is kind of like the magician exposing how they do the tricks, or the curtain being pulled back at Oz, and oh, it's not magic, it's some short bald guy pulling levers, because this is how they actually get you to look where they want you to look. And the bottom, oh yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, they actually, and one thing to note is most costume designers will never color or dress any background actors that are not being cast in red.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I also work in film and I do special effects, so I know it kind of ruins the whole background when I see something. No, I know how this done, or I can see behind this shot here. I know where a lot of us are hiding in order to get something done.
Yeah, I know, and it's, but again, you can live in blissful ignorance and watch everything, but if you do want your imagery to get better, you do need to know this stuff. So on some level, but the thing is, for me, it's never ruined anything. It's always been, oh, they've done that so well. That's really impressive. So it's not like, oh, and it's like, I know how that's done. I'm not impressed anymore. When somebody does something beautifully, you're still impressed. When somebody's telling a really good story, you get lost in that story and stuff like that. But if you are an image maker, you do want to know how this stuff is done. And if you've ever seen The Magnificent Seven, a Western from the 60s, a group of bandits ride into this village at the beginning, and there's a leader of that group of bandits. And even though there's a couple of other people in red, he is the only person with this dark vest and a black hat and red shirt combination. And so when he's on screen, that's the character that you're looking at. And I'm just trying to get these. Are they lined up here? Oh, no, that's Kiki's delivery service. If you've ever seen this, there's a reason she's wearing a giant red bow. And it's not because they thought it was cute. That's a traveling focal point. They've got her in this giant red bow, so she's easily, clearly identifiable in any shot that she's in. And for high key and low key, she's got the red bow and the light skin for low key images. And for high key images, she's got her dark hair and her dark clothing so that she's readable in any kind of environment. Because I've got the book on the making of Kiki's delivery service, and they show all the various character designs they had for her. She had pigtails and a ponytail. She had pigtails with yellow bows, but they decided on this giant red bow because that was going to make her stand out beautifully wherever they put her. That's not accidental. That's by design, and it's for focus. But I wanted to get to, oh, I think here they are. Yeah. There's Daniel in the Lion's Den. There's that illustration. And there's that shot from The Magnificent Seven. And there's a reason they all look the same. Because it's all about the contrast and the color and that kind of stuff that will grab your focus. It's why these guys sitting next to him aren't contrasting as much. And when we go back to rhythm, the rhythm of these ghost shapes, the rhythm and variety of these lions, it's why this guy isn't quite as tall as, high up in the frame as him, and this guy's lower than this guy. So again, all of that is not accidental or arbitrary. The director, John Sturgis, is looking through that lens, and he's going, oh, yeah, maybe you want to lower yourself a bit so we get this beautiful rhythm happening. All of that in that shot is intentional so that it looks like that, so that it's as strong as it is and as visually interesting as it is. If this guy was at the same height as this other guy, wouldn't have the nice variety of arrangement of elements that it does. And all of this stuff is really important to the filmmakers. They don't just come in on set and start filming. One of the biggest complaints actors have had over the years is how much they have to sit around waiting for the lighting to be right, because when they do start filming, you get this. This is from a TV show called Life on Mars. Brilliant TV show. But this is a studio set. And like the James Bond, it's two people talking in a dark room. And they want you to focus on these figures. And it's not about the character. It's not about the subject matter. You're looking here because of the strong lighting on this figure against that dark background, so that she's light valued against all that dark. And she also happens to be wearing red too. And there's a guy sitting over here who you just see a little bit of edge light on. The strongest contrast in that shot is the light value of all of her stuff. So that's going to grab your focus and make you look there. If you don't know this and you're watching the TV show, you think you're looking at that character say her dialogue. But you take a still frame, you're looking there because of the value contrast. This is what you're going to want to start to do to your images so that they read the way that you want. It's not your subject matter, it's not your detail, it's the contrast that you're creating to get your viewer to look where you want. And when they flip the camera in this other like 2 shot where she's now in shadow and you just see a little bit of edge light on him and he's now standing out, he's, you know, this dark blob against this light value, and so he stands out in this shot. And in that upper shot, why is this not possible? This image isn't possible in reality, given the information they're giving us in this shot. This can't possibly look like this.
The lighting.
Yes, the lighting, because he's being valued. The back of his head, the back of his shoulder, the back of the chair would all be brightly lit based on the shadow that he's casting on the table, based on the edge light here. If this was reality and we walked around him in this bottom shot, he would look like this. He would look like that image down here. But because they need readability and focus, they are playing around with the studio lights to make sure that she stands out in that shot and he stands out in this shot, all by value contrast, not reality. They make the images read the way they need to read, and if reality isn't going to help, they don't care. They make it read the way it needs to read. And because it's all about these value relationships.
They also tone down the atmosphere on the top image compared to the bottom one. There's way more atmosphere and smoke in the bottom.
Yeah, this would all be smoky if it was the same room.
Yeah, even though there's probably a good maybe 5 or 6 feet between the gentleman and the one in the back, you can barely almost see him there except for the position of his head and a little bit of light on his face. On the top version, you're maybe about 2 feet between the woman and the other man with the notepad, and it's a bit more clearer.
Yeah,
and you still want to be able to see through that direction from the female to whatever's behind them, and it's. I also realize that you don't want to have a light backing to his jacket because it would detract from her from the viewpoint of the female.
Yeah. If it looked like this, if it was reality, we'd be looking at this big light blob on the right side.
Yeah.
If the lighting was consistent in these shots. But you make the image read, you need it to read. And this is more of a low key image. This is a bit more of a maybe mid key or high key. And this one, the bottom one, is just like a lot of the others. This is, where are you? It's just more a more elaborate version of that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's all about how you create your focus is your strongest contrast, and how you control the rest of the elements in your image is your value relationships. Every professional knows this. That's why every animated film that's well done will be doing this. That's why every comic book that you look at will be doing this. Film, TV, painting, video game. If they're done by knowledgeable professionals who know what they're doing when they're making their images, they are all going to be using this exact same stuff. And so, again, if I'm calling this workshop how to make great images, I did want to go over all of this stuff because they all do help you control what you're doing. I don't want to have all of this be lecture, but I do want to touch on enough of this that if this was the only workshop you got, you could still leave and there'd be useful stuff for you to help you make better images. So I might be getting a little long here, and I don't want to take up all of the time of this course, but I will start to flip through this a bit faster. Here's animation. Here's Brother Bear and the Lion King and the Iron Giant. You see them in color, and they're beautiful, beautiful color films. But every single image that you're looking at, they are making you look where they want you to look by their value contrasts. They are in control of everything. None of it's accidental or arbitrary. They know how to make their images work, and they are doing everything in here is a value contrast, whether it's a high contrast or a little bit of a lower contrast. You're still going to those areas that contrast the most in any particular image. It's how everything you look at works if it's done by a professional. Here are all these beautiful posters for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse when they came out. And if you don't know this stuff, you think you're looking at those characters. You think you're looking here. You think you're looking at Miles because that's who the character is. But you're looking at a dark blob against a light value. And that's what's happening in all of these images. You're going to where the higher contrast of light and dark value is. So when you go to make your own images, this is how you make them. If you want to make them stronger and have more control, and look at the beautiful variety. And again, I wish I had time to do positive and negative shape and space, because there's some beautiful examples here. But there's also, at least, there's rhythm happening with these characters too. I could at least touch on that. But positive and negative shape is something that you're going to want to take a good look at, because it too really helps the aesthetic beauty of what you're doing. And this is what I mean. This stuff has been around for hundreds of years. And like I was telling Brian at the beginning, when I was at OCA in the 80s, they didn't teach us this stuff. I had to learn this stuff on my own. And two of the people that helped teach me what focal point was, one was Rembrandt, and Rembrandt taught me a lot about value control. And the other is this guy. This guy taught me a lot about composition. It's Henri Daumier, a French painter. And the reason he taught me all of this so well is because this is basically what his paintings look like. They are not highly detailed. They are very, very strong in their value contrast. And he does big, blocky characters that are just painted very structurally, but with nice light on the form, but very little detail. So you're not focusing on detail. You're focusing on how that image is reading. I didn't know what a focal area was until I saw this painting of his. It's called The Drinkers. I'd been looking at, Frank Frazetta. I'd been looking at, I don't know if I've got Frazetta here. I know he's around here somewhere. I will be getting to him at some point. But looking at that particular painting is what the little light over my head went on, and that, oh, my eye is going there, not because I'm seeing stuff. My eye is going there because I'm looking at this contrast of light and dark. And I started seeing that in all of Daumier's work, and I started seeing it everywhere. And he's who taught me what focal point was, not any instructor at OCA. And this is beautiful concept work for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Beautiful color, nice style and stuff like that. But every single one of these images there's an area of focus, and it's all being done by value. And if I take the color out of all of these images, where you're looking is all where the highest contrast of value is happening. That's the important part of your image making. And I don't want to, I'm just going to speed ahead. Yeah, and if you're watching the entire film, everywhere you're looking at in the film is where they're making the strongest contrasts of value and then color. That's how this movie reads. But as you watch it, you're invested in the characters and the acting and stuff like that. But for people who make images, we know that this is how the imagery actually functions. You're going here not because it's his father, but because it's a dark blob against a light value. That's how they get you to look there. It just happens in that particular shot, just happens to be the father. And that image of him talking to his mother, if that looks familiar, it's because I just showed it to you, because it's this. It's the same device happening. You're not actually looking at those subject matter. You're looking at that area of light value between these two darker areas. Or you're looking at the area of contrast. But when you're watching it, you think you're looking there because of the actors or the characters saying their lines and stuff. And it's everywhere. There's a shot of Into the Spider-Verse, or the Matrix, the last Matrix movie, or The Third Man. My God, if you ever want to really study focal point and value control, watch black and white movies. They will teach you everything you ever need to know about creating contrast and creating focal areas and controlling your values. And The Third Man is brilliant for that. And so I just want to move on quickly because that was focus, and I touched a little bit on value control. Same thing here. These are two frames from a comic page. In the first one, you're looking at this piece of paper that's sticking out of a drawer. And in the bottom panel, that page is still there. It's right here. But you're not focusing on it as much in the bottom panel as you are in the top, because the contrast has been lowered. Its value contrast is not as high as it is here. And there's a stronger contrast happening in that bottom panel because he wants you to look here. It's all about leading the eye where you want to go by your value relationships, where you want it to look by high contrast and where you don't want it to look by lower contrast. If you start to understand that, you can create anything and have it read the way that you want. And here's Rosetta. That was a cover from a magazine from the 60s. And he started out as a comic artist working in black and white in pen in the 50s. And he transitioned to being a cover artist, a painter of magazine covers and stuff in the 60s. And there is an area of focus in there. You do look at that woman, and she's in a jungle, and she's surrounded by leopards and panthers and stuff like that. Is there something else in that image that might be pulling your focus away from that woman?
That branch on the right, that
Yeah.
S shape.
Exactly. And it's something because Frazetta was kind of new to painting and creating images like this. And again, he wants to show stuff off. He wants to show the beautiful twisty branch there and stuff. And that's a beginner's move. He did a version of this 10 years later, which is much, much better. But if you wanted to put more focus on that woman, if you wanted to keep this image exactly the same, but bring the focus a bit more back to that woman, what might you do?
I'd crop out the branch.
No, you want to keep it exactly the same, but you do want to put focus back on her. It's just value contrast. You lower the sky back there, and then the branch won't stick out as much. You do this. Branch is still there.
Okay.
Yep. And the thing is, he did, and you do look at her, but I guess and Frazetta wanted to show off these panthers and leopards and stuff like that. But over time, as he kept working as a painter for over like 10 years later, from that first version, I guess 10 years later, he knew he was better at this and he wanted another crack at this. He liked the subject matter, but he knew this was not a strong image and he wanted to do a better version of this. And so 10 years later, he did this. That is the same imagery, but just much better control over where he wants you to look. But it's about creating contrast for focus and controlling your values. He got a much better handle on that over time. And I'll show you another one of his. This was another early cover of his for like a horror magazine kind of. And it's King Kong, and you see King Kong, but are there other elements in that image that might be kind of grabbing your eyeballs?
Oh, the giant sun.
Yeah.
It's so stark, and the lighting is also wrong too. He's lit in the front, but there's this giant red ball in the back.
Yeah. It's the red. It's that red.
It's so red. It's the sun, and then it's this rich, saturated red here. Because again, I guess he'd seen sunsets and he wanted to show off a sunset. And then he's also got this rich purple blue that's very saturated. And that was from about, I think, 66, 67. And then about 10 years later, there was a movie version of it. Dino De Laurentiis did a movie version of King Kong, and it's just terrible. But Frazetta did a book cover tie-in, and he did this. He still had the sun, but I cut the sun out. And in that one, he kept the girl. Good choice, because he did a very nice job on that girl with the shape and the hair and the pose and all that kind of stuff. He liked that, and so he kept her. And now there's a bit stronger focus on her. You still go to King Kong. You just don't have all that obnoxious red and all that saturated color and stuff like that. But I'm guessing he still wasn't happy with that he knew he could do an even better version of this, and he did. And it's one of my favorite Frazettas. It's this one. And the big difference between that early version and that version 10 years later, subject matter is still exactly the same. This girl is being shocked by King Kong, and she's turning around, her hair is flying, and King Kong is behind her. Exact same subject matter. Just in that 10 years later, he's learned about value contrast and controlling his value range, and he comes up with a much stronger version of that imagery, because this is what understanding this stuff allows you to do. Where here, he didn't know all that stuff really well, and he was kind of all over the place visually. 10 years later, he gained a much better control over what he was doing, and he comes up with a really strong version of this that I'm trying to get you to this right now rather than the red sun. Because this is what understanding all this stuff will get you. And that's about like value control. It's about creating contrast and then controlling the other stuff that's going on in your image so that it's not getting away from you. And I don't know if any of you know who Bernie Wrightson is, but Bernie Wrightson was a fantastic comic artist. Beautiful work in pen and ink. And he did he did an illustrated version of Frankenstein in 77. He'd been working on it for years. And this was a early version of the cover that he was thinking of. He always liked the confrontation of the monster with Frankenstein in his bed at night. He always liked the dramatic confrontation of that. But he didn't use this because at some point, like he finished it, he penciled it and then he finished inking it. And then I guess at some point he saw that this down here was the stronger focus and not this area up here. It too is like Frazetta's King Kong. It's got stuff kind of popping in ways that you really don't want if you want a strong area of focus. And so he never used that as a cover. He did another version of this confrontation scene. And it's like Frazetta's King Kong. It's like Frazetta's Girl in the Jungle. It's a much stronger, much more controlled version of that same scene, where there is a stronger singular contrast happening, and all of this other stuff is sitting within a more similar value range. It's a version of this, especially if I flip this. Oh, sorry for the left. Yeah. A lot of this stuff will just come down to a much more elaborate version of this use of your value ranges. You know, much more interesting subject matter, but the imagery is still being controlled in the same way this is. And so that's what, again, I showed that one of Mobius, this piece. It's a big battle scene with a huge army, but you're not looking at these figures over here, even though they're taking up a good chunk of the image, because you're looking at his stronger contrast of value over here. This could have been really busy and really grabbed your eyes and stuff, but as big as that army is, he's treating that as a big value mass. And even though it's red, he's keeping that red kind of muted, so even the saturation doesn't grab your eyes the way Frazetta's sun did and stuff. You can have whatever you want in your imagery, but this stuff allows you to control it. And I know we're getting really far along. So that was creating focus and controlling your values. This is placement. This is that place you might want to put your area of focus rather than dead center. This is division of thirds, and there's also division of fifths, and any place off center is good for movement and energy. Doesn't have to be division of thirds. It's just become standard because it's so easy. It's so easy you don't even need to grid it. Like when you use this, you don't even need to grid it. You just put it in that area that you are pretty sure is about a third of the way, and you'll be on there. For fifths, you kind of need to grid that out to be accurate. But this is standard for film, television, animation, painting, everything. And it's basically this. You can have your area focused in the center. That is the most prominent place to put something. But if everything was always dead center, that makes a lot of boring imagery after a while. And so, thousands of years ago, the Greeks were breaking up their picture plane, and they wanted to find a place that was, interesting without being too awkward. This isn't far enough off center, and this over here is maybe too close to the edge that it's a little awkward. And this was one of the placements that was developed that's a very useful area to put your strong area of focus that isn't in the center and isn't at the edge. And it creates a little bit more movement as you look to that, right side or the left side. And you're not stuck in the center of that frame anymore. And you see it in photography all the time. All of these might have been much wider photographs, but when the photographer wants to make a final of it, they might come in and crop that image so that their area of interest is on one of these divisions of thirds in the space that they're making. They might have a grid on their camera where they can make sure that that area of interest is lined up on that area of thirds, or they might crop it so that they get it right on that nice division of space. And it isn't just placing a figure there; it's division of space. In this one of the girl in the upper left, she's on a division of thirds, but the proportion of land to sky is also 2/3 to 1/3, rather than it being like an even division of sky and land. That's another way you can use that proportional breakup of thirds or fifths, not just placement of characters or objects, but the breakup of your space in those divisional sections as well. Like that one over this guy walking his dog, it's mostly not sky, but background environment. It's mostly background, 2/3 background to 1/3, like, land in the foreground and stuff. It just makes a nice proportional contrast rather than even sections. And it makes the imagery more dynamic. And you see this in film and television all the time. An image might start with a symmetrical image. If it's a man-made space, that's the opening establishing shot of a scene. But then they'll go into, for movement and energy, they won't have all of their characters in the dead center of the frame all the time. They will have one character, like in those interrogation scenes. They'll have one character on the left side, another character on the right side. And as you keep going back and forth as you're watching it, there's a lot of movement and energy as your eye goes from one side of the frame to the other. It's one of the reasons that this placement on these thirds is so prominent. It's nicer than dead center all the time, and it creates movement and energy as you're watching these sequential images play out. And so that's why Daniel's placed where he is. That's focus by contrast, that's value control, so these lines don't pop, and it's why he's over on this third division of the space. And then there's there's rhythm. Any arrangement of your elements in your image is going to be its rhythm. And that bottom arrangement, when I ask people, which do you prefer, they always say the bottom one. Except the top one is an option as well. If in your imagery, psychologically or emotionally, you're trying to get across something that's boring or mundane, you're not going to do a vibrant arrangement of your elements. That top choice is going to be the right choice if you want to suggest how maybe static and monotonous something is. Just because the bottom one is more the more common choice that we use, don't disregard something like the top if it's the right choice for what you're trying to get across. Everything is an option. It all depends on your intent.
The top one, if you inverted it so instead of it's white and black, I'm going to go to Star Wars. You could say the top one is the Imperials, and then the bottom is all of your offside characters. You've got Jabba the Hutt, you've got Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, all those kind of characters at the bottom, creating the differential space of the space that they carry out. Whereas the top, you've got very militaristic.
Yes, very uniform pattern. Yeah, absolutely. And that, if you were trying to get across that visually in like a shot, that's the choice that you would use, not the bottom one. So even though the bottom one is going to be the more common option, don't disregard anything depending on what the intent for your imagery is. That might be the perfect choice. There's a American painter who was working in the 60s and 70s named George Tucker, and he did a lot of paintings of corporate life. And he chose that upper option a lot. He had people in their cubicles where they looked very even and very monotonous. He had people eating lunch in an office lunchroom where he made them all the same clothing and all the same kind of drab color, and they're all doing the same movement of putting a sandwich to their mouth. he did not make that vibrant and varied. He wanted to suggest how deadening and monotonous corporate office life was. And you're going to get that across if you choose those options rather than something that's colorful and vibrant and has a lot of variety to it. So Tucker used those options to get that imagery emotionally and psychologically across, because that was his intent. And this is what rhythm does. It really energizes your imagery by giving a lot of, movement up and down and spaces and stuff like that. This still life over on the upper right-hand side would not look the same if all of these vases were all uniform. Even in that arrangement of those vases, some of the visual interest comes from that variety and that movement as you're going from this one up to this one and then down to this one and then that one and then across that bowl and up to that one. That's the rhythmic movement of that still life. And that shot from Mad Men, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show, but you move a few things around and it's mimicking that still life arrangement really closely. This vase is this character. That vase is this character here. If he was over here a bit more, and if he was here, he'd be the bowl, and this guy would be the vase, and these guys here would be this stuff in the middle. A slight adjustment of placement, and you get an even closer match to that still life, because both that artist and the people making that TV show knew that it was about that rhythm of those arrangement of those elements would make a nice shot, a nice painting and a nice TV shot and stuff. So that's what arranging your elements in a varied way gives your imagery. Rhythm can be a really, really vibrant part of your imagery. And here's a whole bunch of images that are playing around with varied rhythm and what that does to, and this Marco Bucci, who's a fantastic illustrator. If these like little baby owls were all on like a branch and they were all the same size, it would not have the dynamic movement that this one does with his varied arrangement and placement of those different sizes and different spaces and stuff like that. So it's to be aware that rhythm can be a big part of the visual impact of what you're doing with your imagery, with your arrangement of your elements. The Stranger Things, I can't remember what season that was, but this particular shot in the living room, I'm watching that and go, yeah, that's a really nice example of rhythm. There's nothing accidental or arbitrary about any of the arrangement of these characters and the lighting of where the focus is and stuff like that. Yeah, Monet. These are landscape paintings, but they are arranged and designed. This bottom left one, these trees may or may not actually have looked like this, but he's playing around with the rhythmic arrangement of those trees. And these ones, they are designed elements when you put a grid on that, because these dominant areas of focus are right on that division of thirds. His breakup of space is, on a division of thirds. That ground plane is 1/3 to the 2/3 up here. He's designing that. He isn't just walking out into a field, putting up his little easel and just painting what's in front of him. He's designing that canvas that he's got so that it will read interestingly. It'll have some movement, some energy, some focus off center and stuff like that. None of that's accidental or arbitrary. It's all designed. And this last aspect of rhythm I'm going to cover is movement, the way that we traveled around Rubens' lions. Movement is another thing you can build into your imagery that adds a lot of movement and energy and visual interest. And it's all about working from the dominant area of focus and then having things that we will see from one point to the next that will lead your viewer's attention. In this particular case, it's a circular movement. It can be a lot of visual pathways, but circular is one of the most fun to play around with. It's about, once you've looked at that dominant area of focus, where can you take your viewer next? You can lead them around your space. And that's why in this one of this wizard trying to tempt a bat so he can use the bat wing in his potion, I guess. There's a book here on this bottom right diagonal that leads to this mortar and pestle over here that leads up into a beaker that on this left side diagonal leads up this way. And on the table, there's some other stuff that leads across the table over to there. And this girl playing a video game in her room, even though the surface subject matter is different, the same kind of devices are being used in the same way. This robot's arm with this speaker is having the same, playing the same part that this book is. When you get down to the speaker, the controls on the floor are playing the same part that these little things on the table are. And once you get to the end of the controls, you're led up into the monitor and you're led that way. When you get down to the stuff on the table, you're led up by the beaker and the mortar and pestle up around that way. It's having that circular shape underneath your imagery and then putting stuff on top of it that will lead your viewer around your image. It's a very, very common device, and it's actually very, very easy to use. This French painter Fragonard did it over and over and over and over and over again. He built circular movement into his imagery. After you've looked at his dominant area of focus, he will lead your eye around his space. And it's one of the things you can do with the elements in your image. Oh, sorry, I already did that one.
Would that not just be the rule of the Fibonacci sequence?
Yeah, Fibonacci is more like division of space. Let me see. Did I put it back in here? Just because it's a spiral that starts as a spiral, but it does lead your eye around a certain section. It doesn't mean that it has to come back in a circular pattern. It does lead you on a curve. It's just that I don't know if it's in here or do I still have it in here? I'm not sure. Oh, sorry. The workshop. It's just that this, oh, not this one, sorry, that's didn't even get to him. I wish I had time to get to him. Yeah, this piece of mine, I didn't grid this, but this is on a division of thirds, and I put the spiral on it, and it still works in the exact same way from the exact same spot. But this one does have circular movement built into it. That's why the shadow in the tree is doing this one. That's why the curve of these clowns are doing this, and that's why the curve of the balloon is going that way. And then there's this balloon, Native Americans feather is going that way, and all of that is to lead you around that space. The spiral just kind of leads you here. If I didn't have this stuff, you wouldn't be quite have that circular movement around that space. And I know I put it in here somewhere. I just don't want to take up everybody's time trying to find some image. But oh, here it is. Yeah. See, there's a division of thirds, and there's that spiral, and it generally would lead you, if you follow it, it's going to lead you out of frame. if you follow that spiral. It doesn't do a circular pattern. It does a curving shape, but to have a circular movement, once you're around here, you've got to bring your viewer's attention back up from there, or you're going to follow that spiral out. Yeah, I think Fragonard was it. And I know I've talked a lot, but I did want to have enough time for you guys to do an image so that we can at least have a workshop part of this. And I'm just gonna bring up some more Mobius because the guy is so damn good. Here he's just got some simple, black and white images, but they all have very strong areas of focus. This one of this woman against a crashed plane in the jungle or something, and you instantly go to her because she's a dark blob against that white plane, and then the rest of the forest is all kind of mid-value of foliage and branches and stuff like that. So he's got a full range of value happening in that image, but there's no question about where you look. And where's the other ones? Yeah, Bernie Wrightson and stuff like this. So for the workshop part of this, whether you're working on paper or digitally or whatever, I would just, ask everyone to come up with an image where they have a very strong area of contrast happening for a strong area of focus. And then maybe start to play around with some of the other things that we've talked about in the workshop if you want. If you want to add more detail, can you render those so that their values don't stand out as much as your area of focus? Or do you want to add more things and play around with the rhythmic arrangement of those? Or do you want to build in some circular movement to your image as well? And I know I've talked way too long for this workshop to really have a lot of time for that. It's just that because I did call this how to make great images, I wanted to cover those 5 things, because if somebody goes back and watches the recording of this, and they can digest it more slowly and start to add those 5 things to their imagery, I know that stuff will help them gain control and increase the visual interest. So I did need to kind of cover all of that stuff. And so I apologize if I've talked way too much, because there is supposed to be a workshop part of this. But I will get to that right now. And so if you guys are able to make an image, come up with something that has a good, strong area of focus. After this, you should know how that's done. It's by your strongest area of contrast. And whatever else you've got going on in your image, see if it needs value control. See if you can play around with the arrangement, or see if you can make a circular pathway around there with the leading our eye from one point to another and stuff. I know it's a lot to cram into a very, very short time period, but even doing something like that girl sitting on the bench with her black umbrella and crows, and the other woman in white, just something like that is a good, strong image with a good, strong area of focus by contrast. So that's the far too long lecture part of this. Again, I'm sorry it went too long, but I did want to try and cover that all that stuff as coherently as I could, so it would be of use to any of you.
It was great. I mean, any class that discusses Mobius for me is cool. Do we send the images? How do you see?
I can stop presenting my screen actually, and anything that you want to present, you just press, click on that little box with the arrow in it, so that you can present your screen, and yeah, we can go over your imagery.
Okay. Can I cheat a little and maybe just show some images I've made before that I'm seeing it now? Because
Sure.
I've made some. I'm gonna shift from my iPad to my laptop because I'm using my iPad. I might disconnect a bit. I'll connect again.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And hello, Mark. I'm sorry, I was right in the middle of talking when you joined. So
That's okay. I got the email stating that it got pushed ahead, and like, oh, I gotta get in. I have an image that I was working with from Ken Burrows.
yeah,
A couple of weeks ago. Just gonna. So there's.
oh yeah, nice. A little castle structure.
Yeah, he's doing the perspective. But I haven't done any values to it. I've kind of just sort of worked in the sky and then did a little bit of inking and then just walked away from it for a couple of days just to tend to mull it over and work on other stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't want you to do it on this, but if you wanted to pull our focus to the top of that structure, what you do is you put shadow on the bottom part of that imagery, and and maybe something up on the top of that, structure up there, a pole, flag, something like that, that has a good strong contrast of value. That would be a way of leading our focus up there. And when we're up there, we see a good strong contrast of value or color. If you wanted to put a red flag flying at the top of that castle or something. Like that. I don't want you to go over Kent's image, but if you were to put a dominant area of focus in there, that's one of the ways you could do something like that.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about putting either a flag with directional motivation and more fantastical, maybe put a couple of dragons in and around.
There you go. That would do it.
But if it's penciled in, but it's small at the same time, it's you can see I'm just there. But as opposed to the size of the castle, the size of the dragon should it be, you wouldn't want to make him too large, but also you wouldn't want to make it too small, because then your eye you have to make that viewpoint go towards a specific, you want to make him a very specific size. You don't want to make him too small or too big.
Well, and again, the only reason we're ever going to look there is because of contrast. The size is what you decide it to be, but it's the contrast that's going to make us look there. And if your castle is in the foreground and kind of dark, and then your sky is kind of dark, but then it gets light where your dragon is, but your dragon is kind of dark against that light sky. In that image, the values where I've got like gray values and I've got the white circle with the black, that would kind of be like that.
Okay.
You mute your castle so that it's dark, and then the sky and the ground around it is kind of darkish too, leaving that area of light value in your sky so that your dragon is this dark value against the lights. That would be the strongest contrast in that image. Because right now it's your castle. If you want us to look at a dragon, you've got to do something with your values to have us look there.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, so that's why because this is getting recorded, if you want to watch this again sometime and kind of absorb the information about controlling values and stuff a bit more, because I know this was like a big info dump, and so it's a lot to take in. But I did want to talk about all these varied things because they will really help in your future imagery, and because it is recorded and you can go back and watch this, as many times as you want. Like I was telling Brian earlier, normally I wouldn't have talked this much. I would have focused on a little smaller aspect of composition, like just creating focus and value control. But because I've called this workshop How to Make Great Images, there had to be more. I needed to give people enough information for them to be able to do that. And that requires going into placement and rhythm and movement and stuff like that.
Right. When you're doing thumbnails, would you have just like scratched out the general shape of the thumbnail and then penciled in different grays and then
Yeah, this is what I
like just something like this?
absolutely, yeah. Because I'll go back and present my screen for a sec because I forgot these two things, and because it's getting recorded, it's still going to be there for people. But I forgot to even show these two parts of it because again, I was trying to move through so much stuff. Where is he? Oh, it's this. This is a concept artist, and this is his process from beginning to end. He'll start with that sketch of his idea. Then he'll go into a rough tonal so he understands what his value relationships are going to be. Then he goes into a rough color to try and figure out his colors. And then he takes it to final with more refining of detail and stuff like that. But that's his rough tonal. It's not super detailed. It's just enough so he knows what his value relationship will be.
And you can see that he's removed the light off the axe and added the light into the upper background. So he's added more tone up to even though it's gray to black for the knight in the back, but you'll notice the small little dwarf character with the axe is no longer right against the background. It's grayed.
Yeah,
he's made the decision to remove that highlight except for just that little blade light.
Yeah, he did not want this to stand out as much as it's doing, so he muted those values. And he did not want this to stand out, so he muted that. And that's why your tonal is so important, rather than if he had jumped to a full color with this, things would have bothered him and he might not be sure why. But when he does a tonal, he go, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that when I get to the final. That's why doing a tonal is so critical. And this guy, Dean Cornwell, one of the best American illustrators, and he always did this. He, as beautiful as his finished painted illustrations were, he always did this. He always did a tonal to figure out how his image was going to read in its values. And they are rough tonals. All he needs to do is figure out his value range. He didn't need to do a beautifully rendered version of these people. He just needed to see how his values were going to read. And so that's all your tonal needs to be. It's just a rough working out of your values, and then you can spend time on your details and stuff. But yeah, your tonal sketch, I would say, is probably one of the most important parts of making an image. And I know it's not the most fun part. Everybody wants to jump right to their fun characters and details. But if you know that this is how images work, you want to figure that stuff out before you start spending all that time rendering and refining stuff. You want to make your image read really well first. And so that when you do go to the more finished details, it's still going to read the way you figured it out earlier. So.
Right. Okay.
Can I? Okay. Sorry. Are you done?
Yeah. Absolutely. Present your screen. Present your screen.
Let me see if this works, because I don't usually present myself. Share. Oh my God. How do I share it? I want to share my screen. Which do I press?
Are you in Chrome? Are you what kind of computer do you have? Do you have a Mac or
I have a PC.
Okay, because I know on my Mac I have to be in Chrome to do this better. It won't.
Okay, Chrome. Yeah, I'm in Chrome.
Yeah, just press that little square with the arrow, and then I click on entire screen, and then press share, I think.
Okay. There you go. There we go. Do you see it? I'm sorry.
Yep. There we go.
Okay. This is actually an illustration I made. I don't know if you like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but this is a
Yeah.
tribute to that. So yeah, yeah, because I was telling you, I know I use these things. I just don't have the formal training to know. But yeah, I use contrast there to really put your eye on that his head, and then you see the vastness of that scene with a sea of people. Because this is about jumping in when you graduate and you're fighting with people for getting to get a job, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
very nice.
And I like David Carson, and when he teaches design, he says that it's nice to break the letters off sometimes and not show it entirely, but just show enough that
Yeah.
people know what you're saying in the word.
Yeah, I
And
mean, and that's why I don't mind. Like when I was talking about division of thirds, and oh, it might feel a little awkward if you put it right at the edge. I don't mind that stuff at all if that's your intent. I mean, like to me, everything is an option if you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. If it's accidental, that might be an issue. But if you know what you're doing and why, then yeah, I have no issue with things being cropped a little bit and stuff. If you're doing that for a specific reason and stuff like that.
yeah, looking back now though, I might have chosen a better color for the slacks, maybe something that's not so warm, because that's also giving off contrast. That's
Well, but the thing is, I might choose if you want him to be a part of that mass, then yeah, go with the green shirt and stuff, because he's just another number in that sea of other people.
yeah, yeah.
Didn't want him to stand out a bit, then you make the shirt a different color. If the slacks are green too, he's not going to come as forward visually as you've got him. So the
That's true.
slacks are fine. Yeah.
Maybe the shirt, right? I could have changed the shirt to something brighter, I think, because he's blending in. Just looking at it now after your discussion and realizing this.
Yeah, if you want him to stand out more, then you change the color of that shirt. But psychologically, thematically, if he is just going to be another one of these, if diving in is going to make him just be another one of this mass, then the shirt isn't too bad of an option. You've got the slacks making him stand out. You've got the hair, the dark value of the hair against that light sky making him stand out. Thematically, that green shirt being the same as everyone else actually fits thematically. So
That's a good point. That's a good point. I didn't realize that. Thanks. Yeah, yeah, because he's jumping in, so he's going to become one of these people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so if he was in like a bright like yellow shirt or a bright red shirt, he'd be absolutely separate from them. But because he's just like them and has to struggle to get a job with all of these other people, that green shirt is actually a really good choice.
Thanks. Anyway, I have a few more. This is a cover design I did. I guess same idea because I really wanted to show that figure and lead the eye going down to read the text because it's a collection of poems. But my friend, since I know him personally, I know it's autobiographical. So it's ultimately his story.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
some-
Yeah, the figure in front of the temple gate, really nice and strong. The text, the value of the text fights with that just a little bit.
I know. I realize now. I could have chosen something less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, if you just take the value, the lightness of it down just a little bit, just to get the strong contrast of the value down just a little bit, that figure, that dark figure against the light value is going to pop even more, and they won't fight. They won't fight as much. But overall, that's not bad at all either, Brian. Those are both really nice pieces.
Thanks, thanks. Yeah, it's what I do. Like, do I have anything? This is again looking at what you said now. I see why people are drawn to the nest first. I don't know if I did that right,
Yeah.
but yeah,
One thing I would do with that is the tree where the head is.
yes, yes.
You got the bird head and then that tree. I would take that tree completely out and put it over on the left side.
I get it. Because that white space is usually gonna frame it. I get it.
Yeah, that dark value of the neck, and it's going to make that head read really well. And if over on the left, you've got that tree and it's got that light value beside it. So, but if you kind of weaken the values by putting another tree there, we won't look to the left quite as much.
Yeah,
And we're going to look at your Birdman's head a lot stronger.
you're right. You're right. Looking back, yeah, things I could have done.
But again, very nice.
Thank you, thank you. That's it for me.
Okay.
Thanks.
No, you're already well on your way to just tweaking those and making those even stronger. So,
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I see it now. I see it now. Thank you. That workshop really
oh, I'm glad it's
helped.
been help. That's what I want it to be. So, for anybody who, again, is interested in making images, I know that information to be of help. So again, yeah, it's kind of why I explained all that stuff, because if this is the only video that somebody sees out there, I wanted there to be enough useful information that they could apply all of that stuff and start to make a lot of improvement in their work. If they're at a certain level, that stuff can help them get better faster. So.
Awesome.
Do you also have a recommendation on any books that you might think of?
Yeah, just a sec, because there's one that came out last year, and I won't mention the publisher. My I'm a coordinator at the concept coordinator at the school, and my co-coordinator, we both got the book because earlier books in their series were good, they were okay, and they did a book on composition, and we thought, oh, because their previous books were good, they'll do a good job on this, and it was disappointing. Yeah, I'm always shocked at how hard people find explaining this stuff, but we went through the book and it's like, that could have been done so much better. But I'll get a book for you. It was originally published in the 50s. When I got it in 84, it had been, it's constantly in reprint because it is such a good book. The imagery in it is from older paintings, paintings that they didn't have to worry about copyright and stuff like that. But it does have a lot of very good information in it. Just stuff. Yeah, I picked up this copy back in 2008 when I started teaching the class again. The one I had in 84 was a different cover. But this book by Henry Poor is a very good book on composition. There's a book on pictorial. I don't know if it's pictorial composition, but Andrew Loomis has a very good book on composition as well. But that whole bit about movement around the image, they didn't teach us that at OCA. I found out about that from this book, from this one page, because like I was saying to some people who were here earlier, I teach my course the way Henry Poor did his book with a lot of visual imagery and explanation of what's going on in those images. With that image and this diagram of for telling you like where your attention goes and how you're led around that image, that was all I needed to understand that aspect of movement around an image. And so I was making my portfolio at the time, and I instantly started putting that into a bunch of my images, because it was that well explained in just a simple diagram with some arrows. So yeah, I think that's a very good book on composition. The imagery might seem a little dated, but that's why I showed that one of Daniel in the Lion's Den and that illustration of the guy on the submarine, because the imagery can be hundreds of years old, but it's the compositional devices that are just as relevant now as they've ever been. So it's the information you get, not the particular subject matter that you're looking at. So.
Thank you.
And so there are probably some other good ones out there. I just never needed it since I started working back in the 80s, since I kind of, and I also studied a lot of film too. I mean, I'm a film nerd my entire life. So not just making paintings and illustrations and loving that stuff, I also loved movies. And so I was always studying film. And every once in a while, you would pick up information about what they were doing behind the scenes, about art direction, about cinematography, stuff like that. And I mean, even back in the 80s, I read a book on Alfred Hitchcock by an author named, I think his name is Donald Spoto. It's called Dark Side of Genius. You can probably still get it. And one half of it is kind of detailing Hitchcock's kind of weird life. But another aspect of the book is, because it's called The Dark Side of Genius, it goes into what he did in his filmmaking. And he talks about things like mirroring, which I had no clue existed. But once you read about it, once you see it in action in his films, you see this stuff everywhere. You see characters being mirrored by the way one character looks, and then another character looks kind of similar to them, because thematically, the filmmakers are bringing up that comparison for thematic reasons and stuff like that. And I didn't know that was something you could do visually, but Spoto talked about Hitchcock doing it. And so you pick up little bits and pieces about composition and image making from all various sources. So study film, study black and white film. Black and white film. Oh, are people aware of a movie coming up called Nosferatu? Has anyone seen the trailer for that? It's by a director named Robert Eggers, and he did a film a number of years ago called The Witch and The Norseman, and The Lighthouse. That was with Willem Dafoe, and he's a very good director. But his new film coming out at Christmas is Nosferatu, and I guess it's the Dracula tale. The original silent film from the 1920s called Nosferatu was Dracula. They just couldn't call it that, so that's why they labeled it Nosferatu. And then in the 1990s, when Francis Ford Coppola did his version of Dracula, he was heavily influenced by the black and white silent film. And I just saw the trailer, and Eggers is doing the exact same stuff. He's being influenced heavily by Coppola, and he's borrowing. The director of the original black and white silent film is a German director named F.W. Murnau. And Marnow also did a brilliant black and white film, silent film called Faust. And he's borrowing imagery from Faust that Stranger Things borrowed. That these guys at the early days of filmmaking, silent filmmaking, they invented film language, and everybody's borrowed what they did in film ever since. Even though they didn't have sound, they didn't have color, they told stories purely visually, and people have borrowed that technique of visual storytelling ever since. And I just saw Eggers, even in the trailer, very clearly borrowing stuff from Coppola, who had borrowed stuff from Marnow, and it's like 100 years later since the first silent film, but they're still using the exact same kind of imagery to get across the exact same stuff. And so studying old black and white film, or even studying silent film, is not a chore. If you really do want to get good at this stuff, there is a gold mine of beautiful, solid compositional information to be gleaned from looking at black and white film and silent film. If this is something that you're interested in and want to get good at. Yeah, if people go to Nosferatu and they go, wow, that's amazing, it's gorgeous. Well, a lot of it comes from something that was done 100 years ago. So just current stuff, might be beautiful too, but there's a lot of value to be found in filmmaking from the silent era and the black and white era.
One film I like in terms of composition is the Blade Runner, the original one.
Oh yeah,
the frame. Oh my god.
Yeah, Blade. Well, Ridley Scott, because Ridley Scott was he came from advertising, and so he knew his first film before that was called The Duelists, and he went a little heavy with a filter that would darken the sky. If you ever see that film, it's a little noticeable that he's darkened the sky in a lot of his films by a filter. But he's a very visual director because he came from commercials and advertising, where the imagery had to be fast but had to be very visually clear and coherent. And so, yeah, Ridley Scott's always been a very strong visual director. And yeah, Blade Runner is a fantastic film visually. Yeah, it's a great film anyway, but just purely visually. And a lot of that, the look of that, is by a concept artist named Sid Mead. He worked on the Star Wars films, and he also worked on the designs for Blade Runner, the buildings, the vehicles, just things that would clean the streets, or the flying cars and stuff like that. A lot of the reason Blade Runner looks the way it does is because of a brilliant concept artist named Sid Mead.
There's one new image that came out, because you brought up an image of Frankenstein. We've actually just finished filming Frankenstein in Toronto from Guillermo del Toro, and they just released on Vanity Fair their behind the scenes photo of Frankenstein's laboratory with the monster on the left. He's on the slab table, and then on the right image there's this beautiful ornate round window, and like two gigantic big green glass tubes covered in copper, and then the Frankenstein or the doctor is standing in the middle of the frame, slightly higher than the monster, but very, very small compared to the size of the overall monster, but the window is, because I believe he gets thrown out at some point. But the window is like the overall design of the structure is just so big. You can pull it up on Vanity Fair to look at it, but it's one of the big main shots that, and you can, like, unfortunately you can see the big crane in the back corner. Like it still is in the shot. So it's not a full completed image. Like there's set pieces and cameras in the way, but you can also see things like the grating in the floor, the how it almost disappears. Like it's an old style, like a really old. It's messy. The ground's dirty. There's blood and there's
Nice.
there's body parts all sort of covered on things. Like the tables are all messy, and they've done such a good job in terms of prop department. The lighting is in the right spot. It's a beautiful image, and a lot of people have taken it and already dissected it as opposed to like, oh, we're not sure if the movie is going to be good. Like this, it's a beautiful movie. He spent I think about almost 2 years making it. So
yeah, and that's what I mean. Like every professional image maker who's good at this knows all of the stuff I talk about in design comp, and I'm sure the people working on that film, the director, the cinematographer, the director of photography, the art director, I'm sure they're all very well versed in all of this visual stuff because they need to make their imagery read, and they want to make it read exactly the way they want it to read. And so they're going to spend time in that studio to get the particular light just right in a particular spot and stuff like that. So when you're watching it, your focus is exactly where they want. I'm by the sound of it, it sounds like the people making it really know their visual language or their compositional language. But if I can present my screen, I did. Again, there was a lot of stuff I put together that I just didn't have time to touch on, but where is the thing? Yeah, that's the, but I also added the one from, nope, that's just how a bunch of random television and movies and stuff read. Where did I put the one from Nosferatu? That's thing. Oh, that's Stranger Things. I know I put it in here. And I'm just trying to find, where would I have put it? Television, movies. Oh, here it is. This should be it right here. Yeah. Well, I must have it in 2 sections. So there must be, oh, here we go. There's I don't know if you've ever seen any imagery from the silent film of Nosferatu, but best vampire ever.
I've actually seen a copy of it, but apparently you can't. It's actually you can't actually get copies of it because it was the rights were actually removed from the company.
Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, Max, this is a German actor, Max Schreck, one of the best visual presentations of Dracula ever. And they did, because it was the 1920s and German expressionism was very big in film. They've got these beautiful images of distorted shadows and shape design and stuff. And it's very atmospheric film. And Coppola in the middle here, when he, in the 90s, when he did his version, he borrowed heavily from what Marna had done in Nosferatu. And at the bottom here is what Eggers is doing in his current version. And this is right at the end of the trailer. And she's over, this is probably Mina Harker, I guess. She's over on the far right, and the light, even though it's not strong, is on her. So you focus on the strongest contrast in the image. And then the curtain blows, and I'm sure a digital shadow falls across her to darken her values. So we now look at the strongest contrast now, which is the shadow of Nosferatu that's being seen against that drapery of the curtain and stuff. And that's how the trailer ends. And they're using shadow of Nosferatu for their imagery as well. But what I laughed at was this. This is from Faust. And I know to modern eyes it might look a little clunky or something, but back in the day, just the way King Kong, the original 1930s King, like 33 King Kong, is, to me, it's still brilliant. As clunky as it might look, it's still a brilliant film. This, back in the day, would have had people's jaws dropping in terms of this was the top of the 20s, like special effects and stuff. And it's the devil spreading his influence or his evilness over a little town, over a little city. And so the only way they could do that back then was with practical effects. But thematically, that's what's happening. It's the devil's having his influence spread across this town. And in Stranger Things, when they get to the big mind flayer, in one of the later episodes, there's this shot, and it's the mind flayer's evil influence, about to overtake a city, and it's imagery directly related to Faust from 100 years earlier. And in Eggers' current Nosferatu, he's got this shot of the city of London with this big shadow of a hand creeping over the city. And it is a direct steal from Faust in terms of the imagery of evil casting its shadow across a city. Stuff. So, yeah, there is still stuff you can learn from silent film or black and white film. If you guys are interested in expanding your knowledge and skill in controlling your imagery, that stuff is not a bad place to look. The Innocents, absolutely brilliant black and white film. Shot after shot after shot. It is just gorgeous and incredibly readable, and also very atmospheric and creepy. Just with and again, it's why I don't mind figures being cropped right at the edge of a frame, because it goes to intent. This girl's head cropped where it is very unsettling, and it's intended to be that way. It wouldn't have the same effect if she was nicely framed. And
That reminded me of Citizen Kane.
oh, I've got Citizen Kane.
There's, and I,
Yeah, there's Citizen Kane right there. Again, not one of my favorite films. I find it a little on the dull side sometimes, but man, visuals wise, it is a masterpiece. You cannot go wrong studying Citizen Kane if you want to get a good understanding of how to create focus and maintain control in your imagery. Casablanca is great for that too. Casablanca is like one of the best films ever made, but people might stay away from it because it's old and it's in black and white. But if you want to learn about creating focus and controlling your values, watch Citizen Kane. Every frame can teach you something in there. And, oh, yeah, that's the Innocence. And oh, yeah, Third Man. Third Man is one of the best of the bunch. Yeah, it's one of the most visually stunning films you're ever going to see, and it's been highly influential to other filmmakers and comic artists just because of how strong their visuals read. A comic artist will watch that film and go, "Yeah, I'm stealing that. I'm taking that." So, yeah, film is another area if you want to expand. You wanted a good book on composition. Film is a great book on composition. Black and white film is a great book on composition. But Janice, have you come up with an image that you might want to show? Or Manira, either of you, if you want something you want to show, just oh, okay, sure. Well, I hope you got something out of this that you can hopefully bring to your work later. I hope this was a useful workshop for you. Oh, I'm glad. Well, thank you for attending. I'm glad it was helpful for you. Yeah, because like I told Brian, I it's a joy for me to pass this stuff on because I know that it can be of help to people in getting their if they love this stuff and they want to get better and they go, how do I make this, I'm struggling, how do I make this better? I know even just the few things I talked about can start to give people more control and impact over what they're doing. So yeah, I love passing this stuff on. Yes, absolutely. It's why I'm kind of shocked other teachers at other schools aren't teaching this stuff. It's, to me, it's so easy. Oh, very nice. Yeah, good, strong area of focus. Yeah, very cool. Like how you've got it like coming up out of a mist. And yeah. Yeah, and you've got rhythm with the variety of your buildings there and stuff. Very nice. It's 4. If I don't want to, take up everyone's afternoon, I've got more stuff I could blab about if you want. I could keep talking about this stuff. I just don't want to, eat up all your afternoon. So if you guys are done, that's fine with me. So. Oh, Mark, your mic is off anytime.
Sorry, I had this on my shelf. It's a book by Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote Tarzan, Pirates of Venus. It was written in the 1950s, but it's very heavily influenced on Franzetta.
Yeah.
And there's about 30 or 40 books, they're like $5 each, but the stories are really good. But the art is really collectible at this moment because it's not in print anymore. But the original the artist, I believe it's Roy Cankel. He was heavily influenced on from Franzetta. You'll notice that because on his title image as well, it's a very much, even though it's hard to see, he's got that line work and the flow of the characters. were very much, everyone was sort of focusing on trying to be like Franzetta at that moment within a couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. No, Frazetta was a hugely influential illustrator, and but again, he had a huge influence on me when there were a series of books. Just a sec, I'll go get them. Yeah, these came out in the mid-70s. These softcover books of collections of Frazetta's illustrations and stuff. And yeah, Howard Pyle's another great American illustrator, but yeah, I think the first one came out in 75, I think, and I would have been like 13. And so I'm looking at this stuff and I'm going like, this is amazing. And yeah, it's because, like I said, he started out as a comic artist. He started out doing comics in the 50s, and then in the 60s, he transitioned to magazine and book covers. But he also did, pen and ink images as well. And yeah, he did a lot of Conan the Barbarian covers and stuff. And this is the stuff that was blowing everybody away, except this is where I'll go back to, it's good to know your art history, because I'll present my screen again. And this is, again, you want a good book on composition, you're going to want to write down this guy's name and just Google his work, because like black and white film, this guy, looking at any of his work, can teach you everything you're ever going to want to know about composition. And I'm just going to, just need to find out where I put that stuff of Doré and Frazetta, and it's here somewhere. I will find it. I put various stuff in various areas because I didn't know what I was going to end up using or showing. No, that's Stranger Things. Oh, look at the ways I can do that. If I can just go to my window and make stuff bigger. Oh, show. There. And I'll just move around until I find it. Because it's hard to see when everything's so small. But Frazetta was influenced himself by a bunch of people. One was a fantasy illustrator from the 30s named John Allen St. John, I think is his name. I can't remember quite sure. He was a big influence on Frazetta. And but there was a French illustrator. They're always French. They're always like the best. This guy, French illustrator named Gustave Doré. This guy that was a big influence on Frazetta as well. This image of a knight during the Crusades, this triangular composition, with the apex being this guy swinging a sword, and these figures down here. Frazetta borrowed a lot of what's in this image by Doré for this Conan piece. And there's a current concept artist named Biard Wu who's really good. And it looks like he's been looking at Gustave Doré as well, because you can see, I can see the influences of Doré's really strong visuals in what Wu is doing. But this is Gustave Doré, and this is what I mean about, if you really do want to study this stuff, don't shy away from silent film or black and white film, because they could teach you a lot. And Gustave Doré was working back in the 1860s, 1870s. But just because he was working over 100 years ago doesn't mean you can't learn something from this guy. Everybody borrows from Gustave Doré, because every single one of his images has absolutely beautiful control over focus and then the rest of the values in his image, no matter what he's doing. He has beautiful creation of focus and beautiful value control. And this is what I mean about it's still as current as it's ever been. That one on the left, that's a Gustave Doré piece from the Crusades. And it's a city, and you see a crowd of people, and there's a little bit of that bright contrast where you go to that shadowy figure, and that's where your eye goes. And somebody who's been working for Riot, who did a concept piece, there's no way you're going to tell me that that person doesn't know Gustave Doré, because even though this subject matter wise looks different, they've basically done their version of this illustration. It might not look exactly the same, but they are doing the same things Doré was doing this image to make their image read. And that's what I mean. If you're looking for a good book on composition, write down Gustave Doré's name, Google his work, and that will be a great book on composition if you just study what he's doing, because he can teach you a lot. And so, yeah, I was absolutely blown away by Frazetta when I saw that when I was like 13, 14, and 15 and stuff. But the time I got to 18, that's when I found out who people like Howard Pyle and Dean Cornwell and N.C. Wyeth were. And they were these amazing American illustrators too, who were working in like the 20s and 30s and 40s. And their stuff was just, to me, was just stunning. I wanted, as much as I loved Frazetta, Frazetta is a very theatrical image maker, in that there'll be, because he was making book covers and a lot of that stuff is central location, a lot of his imagery is this. The area of focus is in the center. It's very dramatically lit. And if there's other stuff going on, it's not overly detailed. He doesn't have a lot of stuff to deal with. And I wanted to be able to control more complex images than that. And I found that in N.C. Wyeth and all these other guys. But yeah, I love Frazetta, hugely influential illustrator. We all do. All of the teachers at the school love Frazetta, like all of us of a certain age anyway. But I see some people have left. And again, I don't want to take up everybody's Saturday afternoon. So I guess we'll just end the workshop here. And thank you all so much for coming. And I'm really glad you got something out of this that you can take with you and put into your work from now on. So.
Thank you very much, Scott. I'll push the drawing from Kent a little bit further, but the idea of the focal point really kind of solves that sort of idea of where things are going to be grayed out. I had no idea, and I've actually never really seen that sort of style before, even though I've gone to school for years, and it's been a while. It's been years since I've never seen that sort of thumbnail. I've always just seen oh, here's the thirds, divide your piece up, but not really how to gray things out and focal point areas and stuff like that. So that actually kind of answers a lot of questions about where light is going to happen and where focal points. So that does definitely help.
And it's a critical part of making your image, because I know a lot of people just jump to rendering and detail and stuff like that. But if your image doesn't have a dominant area of focus, or if it's got a whole bunch of areas that are all equal in their contrast, that's going to make a busy, hard to read image. But if you understand how to create a dominant one and then treat all your other areas with varying degrees of value, controlled relationships, that's how you can make anything you come up with read exactly the way that you want. It's that critical that it's the control device for any image that you want to come up with. So, I'm glad you were able to get that out of this workshop. So,
and I really appreciate how, looking at Mobius, how intentional things are, and for Zeta, it's nice to learn that today.
Yeah, and I know when people don't know this stuff, they might think watching a movie or a TV show, oh, it just happens like that. But no, if it's by a professional image maker, no matter what the media, none of that, what you're looking at, is accidental or by arbitrary, or it's a lot of thought has been put into making the imagery read the way they want it to read. Again, those two shots from Life on Mars, if the camera had gone around where he's being lit from behind and the camera had gone around to get the other shot of the girl, he'd be brightly lit if we're following that lighting for that shot. But no, for the other shot of her, they have to make sure the lighting is different on him than they're telling us it is in the other shot. So that's how important all of that stuff is to the people who actually make TV shows and movies and animated films and stuff like that. How their visuals read is a critical consideration to people making that stuff. The people watching it might not notice it, but the people making it know how critical all of that stuff is. So, yeah, just thank you all so much for coming. And if it was a little confusing, there's the video to watch again. And for anybody who wasn't here and is watching this later, I hope you too have gotten something out of this presentation. Because again, this information's been around for hundreds of years. I'm just somebody passing it along today, and I hope you got something out of it. So,
thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you, and thank you, Janice. And have a great rest of your day, guys. Take care.